even Game of Thrones, a lot of the not many of the main characters are people of color. Why, in your opinion, is fantasy so monocultural?
Well, I think there's a relatively simple answer. It's so monocultural because it's mostly been written by white men. And,
Now, one thing I found fascinating about your new book is the fact that it shows us the world beyond what we've seen. It shows us countries, places that are influenced maybe by Asia or North Africa or the Middle East. But for the most part, fantasy is very monocultural. You know, you watch the film like The Hobbit, there are no black hobbits walking up and down, or even Game of Thrones, a lot of not many of the main characters are people of color. And I'm wondering.
Wow, you can see George. George is like, what is this motherfucker asking me? This idiot, this guy, this interviewer who's asking him this question, is a piece of shit. What a disgust! Because the insinuation is that George R.R. Martin and his books are perpetuating a form of racism. Whether or not his intention as a writer was to be racist, it's the idea of the white privilege. It's the idea of the white supremacy. That there's a system in place of evil, racist white people deliberately going out of their way to try to suppress blacks. So really, he's basically implying that George is, if not a direct racist himself, is helping perpetuate a racist system by not having more black characters. And the same implication is true when he mentioned there's no black hobbits. So George is like, what are you asking me?
Why, in your opinion, is fantasy so monocultural? And what could be done to change that?
Maybe there should be more black fantasy writers. That's not racist. I mean, if you're going to make distinctions along the basis of race, if you're going to say there should be more black, fantasy actors, black fantasy characters. The truth is, if I turn on BET right now, good old BET, Black Entertainment Television, I don't see that many white people on that channel. In fact, if you go to Google, you type in BET hosts, all you see is black. Black, 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 black. It's just black people. Is it racist that BET, Black Entertainment Television, is geared mostly towards black and has a primarily black hosts, producers, and actors on their shows? It's not racism, buddy. It's not black privilege. It just might so happen to be that black people, because of the evolutionary rising, I'm going to get to George R.R. Martin's response in a moment, the evolutionary rising of people, for whatever coincidental reason, blacks happen to be centered primarily around Africa and the Middle East. Whites happen to be more Caucasian. Caucasians happen to be centered more towards Europe. The fact that people grew up in certain areas and that we evolved through our genetics to be associated with certain skin colors doesn't mean that there's racism. It just means that if you're born in a black community, you're probably going to embody black culture. If you're born in a white community, you're probably going to embody white culture. Now, as boundaries dissolve, as people rise out of the slums of the past, as people intermarry of different races, as people overcome these primitive needs to judge on the base of skin color, such a superficial standard to judge, as people overcome that, we no longer have to say, oh, I'm white, hence I'm going to inevitably be associated with white culture. Oh, I'm black, so I'm going to naturally be associated with black culture. That is disintegrating. That is going away to the point where it's not about whether or not it's black culture or white culture. It's really what it comes down to is your culture something that's productive and healthy and that doesn't self-destruct? And that should be the only determining factor of whether or not you support a certain culture. Let's get into George R.R. Martin's response. Poor guy.
Well, I think there's a relatively simple answer. It's so monocultural because it's mostly been written by white men. And,
Thank you, George R.R. Martin, for a very straightforward and simple factual response. Some would say that's probably racist. It's racist to say that white men are the primary writers of fantasy fiction throughout history. That's not racist. Now, if you don't like that fact, if you're like this black interviewer who doesn't like the fact that most fantasy is dominated by white authors who, because it's part of their natural evolutionary rising and cultural influences to want to write about their kind and their people, then why don't you, the interviewer here, the black interviewer, why don't you go write your own fantasy novel? And you can include all the black people you want that are associated with your upbringing and your culture. So if you're so angry that white people are writing books and the books are correlated to their white upbringing / cultural background, why don't you or other black men, and the reason I use quotations is because to call somebody a black person is a generalization that basically says the primary distinguishing factor, the primary element of who you are that should be used to address you is your fucking skin color. That's ignorant mainstream media race baiting language. And although it helps to call him black because it's just easy in terms of vocabulary to say, oh, the black guy did that, or oh, it was that white guy over there. Not necessarily racially motivated, but you see how the term can lock people in to generalizations like, oh, black people must do this or white people should do that. So that's why I use quotations. But the truth is he's falling into that very same paradigm of black versus white. So in a way, I'm kind of giving him a taste of his own medicine. The truth is, why doesn't he go write a fantasy book? Or why does one of his black community members go write a fantasy book? I'm sure there's been some fantasy stories written by blacks. If you want a black fucking hobbit, go write your own fantasy story with black hobbits.
I'm a 66-year-old white man. Tolkien was I don't know what age he was, but he was born in the 19th century in England, and he was an Oxford Don. He lived in small English towns his entire life. And we look back on our own history and the cultures and things we were taught, raised up on legends of Robin Hood and King Arthur, and Tolkien was an expert on Beowulf and all that. And that's true of many of the Tolkien imitators, even the people writing it today, are all drawn from the same cultural pool. So that's largely why it is what it's been up to the present. However,
man, let me tell you, man, that interviewer, what a douchebag. Totally put George R.R. Martin on the spot with a disgusting, race-baiting, whining question.
I do see evidence that's changing. If you look at the World Science Fiction Award, the Hugo, which is given every year, and the John W. Campbell Award, which is an award for the best new writer, that's given every year at the World SF Convention. More and more of them have been writers of very different endings.
Look at the smug look on this prick's face. I don't know who you are, man, but you're a smug prick. You're a smug little prick, man. Look at that look. He's like, why aren't there more black actors, black fantasy characters? I'm angry at white privilege. White privilege is everything that's wrong with my life. It's all about white supremacy and white privilege. Reminds me of a tweet I sent out the other day. My tweet, every time you say white privilege, you are actually reinforcing it. Pointing out white superiority 24/7. Sounds like the KKK. Some people are just, and sadly, it's primarily people whose skin pigmentation is black are some of the primary ones whining about white privilege. I was born here in America. My parents are Cuban, Hispanic. My parents were raised in basically a ghetto, a Miami ghetto, and they rose and they worked hard. And when you work hard, you produce wealth, and with that wealth, you can use it to sustain your life and the people you care about. It's not racism. It's not white privilege. It's called individuals working hard to create long-term sustenance in their lives. Just stop fucking whining. This whining mentality of this guy right here is part of what is crippling black progress. It really is. It's similar to the liberal plantation, the way that liberals enable a victimhood mentality in black communities that excuses their self-destructive behavior. So when there's black on black crime, or when there are higher crime rates committed by blacks than by whites, percentage-wise, the liberals will sweep in and say, it's not your fault, black man. It's the evil white man. It's the white privilege. It's the white supremacy. And we're not going to hold you responsible for your self-destructive behavior. Well, it's kind of a chicken or the egg question. A black man on Twitter sent me a tweet. Top cop in Chicago blames the justice system for violence in Chicago. We all need to be outraged about the violence in Chicago. So outraged that we look at what root causes can be addressed. He's basically saying that the root cause of violence in Chicago is the so-called racist police criminal justice system, that the police are making it hard. And I said, well, chicken or the egg? Does racist policing ruin black lives? Or does self-destructive black behavior lead to policing? So, you know, it's a question of the chicken or the egg. And it's a hard one because maybe, and I'm sure there has to be, some racist cops. But is their prejudices towards the black community partially based on a tendency within the black community to commit and take part in self-destructive violent behavior? So it is a good question. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? People have a lot of questions about that. Personally, my ultimate response to him that I told him was, after I told him I don't know the answer, chicken or the egg. What came first, racist cops or self-destructive black behavior that justifies criminal prosecution that is aggressive, and some people say leads to black self-destructive behavior? Well, I told him I don't know the answer, but I tend to lead towards individual personal responsibility as a solution, not blaming others. Which goes back to this idiot here. He just, look at this smug look on his face. It's almost like he's angry that Frodo wasn't black. He's like, God damn it, Frodo was supposed to be black. At least make Gandalf black or something. And you know, I guess he probably does feel bad that Sauron, the antagonist in the movie and the books, is often referred to as the Dark Lord. Dark, black. It is interesting that black is often associated with evil in our archetypal storytelling. You know, the Dark Lord, the Black Tower, the evil Dark Master. It's all. Whereas the white shining light and the Savior and Gandalf the White. That is an interesting thing. I wonder about that. And it might just be because darkness we associate with fear. You know, people are afraid of the dark. People aren't afraid of the light. They're afraid of the dark. You know, you turn the lights off, you're scared of the dark, the unknown, that which hides in the shadows. So, yeah, let's go ahead and finish up here.
Backgrounds, more and more women, women of color, women from other countries of Indian descent, of black writers.
So he basically says that there's a growing number of minority or colored people who are being fantasy authors. It reminds me of this guy. This Tumblr is exposing Hollywood's problem with people of color. Dylan Marin is making videos of every single word spoken by a person of color in Hollywood movies. Basically, he's a white dude, actually. He's editing movies, famous movies, so that the only bits in the movie are those where black actors are there and they're speaking. And of course, he's trying to say, well, look at the evil, white, evil Hollywood, you see, it's mostly white people. Again, maybe it's mostly white people because white people have built their own white empire, their own white civilization. So it's not necessarily that they're racist. Maybe they have more hard work, generationally speaking, over the past 200 plus years, which builds in the form of capital wealth that you save over time throughout generations, that allows them to have this prosperous civilization. Thus, whining, is not the solution. The solution is my tweet. I tend to lead towards individual responsibility as a solution, not blaming others. Work hard, be innovative, and whether you're black or white, or even if you're a woman, if you prove your skill and your value, people will reciprocate with more value. Andrew from South Carolina took the red pill, and he says, it works exactly as advertised. I took it during meditation and I could finally focus. Jessica from California took the red pill, and she says, I felt calm and focused. I am pretty creative, but after taking it, the ideas were flowing. People from all over the world have taken the red pill. It's your turn to choose. Click the screen to learn more.